the book of Job, chapter number 6,
Right.
verse 1 until verse 4. Job, chapter number 6, verse 1 to 4. But Job answered and said, "Oh, that my grief were thoroughly weighed, and my calamity laid in the balance together. For now it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words are swallowed up. For the arrows of the Almighty are within me, the poison whereof drinketh up my spirit. The terrors of God do set themselves in array against me. For a short time, take off the scale. Get rid of the scale."
All right.
Job is known more importantly for his sorrows and his prosperity in the beginning, more than he is considered for his latter end.
Yeah.
We speak more of Job's losses,
Yeah.
more than we speak of his restoration.
Yeah.
The scriptures in this whole book seeks to teach us of patience and faith. And the scriptures that are contained in the book of Job, though they show us his prosperity, they also are weighing on his affliction.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk on his prosperity, but because of the verses in this chapter, I'm going to zone in on his affliction.
All right.
We have a tendency as the people of God to measure our success by the lack of troubles in our lives.
Yeah.
We have a tendency as the people of God, especially believers, that we want to associate our testimonies to victories than to consider that we go through afflictions. But I want to tell you today that you can also measure your blessings by your afflictions.
All right.
You can weigh the blessings of God by considering your troubles. Because there is no gospel that even Christ, when he came, he did not teach us of only prosperity.
Yeah.
No gospel should seek to tell the people of God that you should not suffer. That gospel should just be canceled out because it seeks to diminish the processes that God takes us through.
Yeah.
And that gospel is really a false gospel. And unfortunately, we live in times where wrongly you are told about do this and you will be blessed.
Yeah.
Pay this much into the account and you will see a blessing. And I want to tell you and say to the church, it is not wrong. Because yes, they only zoned in on the part where God says, if you give the 10th of what you get, I will open the windows of heaven upon you. There's nothing wrong with the gospel. But when that gospel seeks to make troubles that the children of God go through to be a lie, the gospel becomes a false gospel. Though Job was a prosperous man, last week Saint Shumarai indicated to us that it was not because of his mistakes that trouble fell on him. It was not because of his sins that trouble fell upon his life. It was not as a result of what he did, that he suffered. Sometimes God just allows things to be. And when God allows things to be, you need to move on and understand that this phase of my life seeks for me to zone in on what will this affliction bear unto me. But the Job says, if my afflictions and my calamities were to be put on a scale and weighed, surely they are heavier than the sand. Because sometimes troubles are greater than your victories. But we learn to celebrate the little victories in our lives because we know that that trouble prepares us for what God has prepared for us. But this trouble, unless you go through afflictions, your patience cannot be, what is that? Cannot be signed off. Let me use a technical word. You see, when you are preparing a project, you prepare a project, and after you have done the scope for a project, you need to take the scope to the stakeholders, and the stakeholders need to agree with you that this is what we want to see. The objectives of the project are met in your scope, and there at the end of the scope, they sign off, and they give you the right to say, go ahead with the project. And in this case, the stakeholder is God, and troubles are but the scope of work that needs to happen in your life. The problems and afflictions that you go through are but the scope of work that God is doing through you. And when the stakeholder signs off on your troubles and your afflictions, therefore patience is confirmed. Now, David says his anger is but for a moment. And he goes on to say, weeping endure for a night. But there's a promise, because there's always a link to affliction. If you cannot have affliction as an input and the output continues to be affliction. Well, when the input is affliction, the output is joy. When the input is death, the output is everlasting life. When the input is sickness, on the other side of that, the output becomes healing. When there's trouble in our lives, the output thereof is the joy of the Lord. Weeping may endure, that's affliction, and that is an input. But joy comes in the morning. David says, Psalms 27, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I be afraid of? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When my enemies and my foes came upon my flesh to eat it up, they stumbled and they fell. But here it is, though an host may encamp against me, one thing have I desired of the Lord. That's where he goes. That's where he goes. And this is what he says. This is what he says. For in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. Whoa, go back. What did it start? The verse says, in the time of trouble, take off the scale of your issues. Don't measure them all the time, because the scale will fail, but God will prevail. In the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me upon a hill. I believe it was King David as well, as he was writing one of his songs. And he says, many are the afflictions. You see, there's been a verse that says many are the blessings. Because the blessings of God are rich in themselves. But this seeks to indicate that we will go through trouble. Well, for the past 14 or 15 months or so, this has become proof positive that the church and the people of God are resilient in their faith. We have proved since COVID came that there's an element of resistance and resilience with us because we have weathered the storm. We have gone into the eye of the storm. And if you understand National Geographic, they tell you that there are all sorts of whirlwinds in the eye of the storm. When there is a storm, you don't want to be caught in the eye of the storm because there the winds do not have one direction. They go in all directions. They swirl in all directions. And sometimes you would see a whole house being twisted up in the air by the storm. But God being God, has taken us through the storm. Evangelist Steve always says, if you go to it, you will go through it. And this we should know, that as long as God brings us to it, he will bring us through it. Because that's not where we park our vehicle. That's not where we build our tent. When you go through trouble, you don't build a tent. You don't build a house. You set up a temporary structure. Come on, what are you talking about, elder? Romans chapter number 8, the 18th verse. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time. For I reckon. See, Paul uses magical words. He uses the word reckon. Reckons means he considers. He has weighed all the options. He has looked at all sides of the coin. And he comes to this final conclusion. And he says, for I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy, listen to the words, are not worthy to be compared to the joy and to the glory that will be revealed in us. You cannot build a tent. Don't build a structure that is permanent, because your problems are not permanent. They are but temporal. They are but for a moment. And if you know that they are just for a moment, you will know that you don't want to measure them all the time. The brother Kolani and his friends, the fitness friends, they always want to put someone on the scale. But people, psychologists always say, don't weigh yourself all the time, because the number that comes out on the scale might disappoint you and it might discourage you. Say, I have 5 months of diet, but I do not see any change on the scale. This is what I'm talking about. Don't weigh your troubles all the time. Look to God, because he is our light. Look to God, because he is your deliverer. Look to God. Can I add on this? Paul writes in the second book of Corinthians, chapter number 4. And he writes on this one, verse 17. Your troubles are temporary. Please, if you have a neighbor, tell them, don't build a house. Pitch a tent.
Don't build a house, pitch a tent.
You see, a tent you can remove anytime. A house, you have to lose all the investment you have made. When it comes to your problems, when it comes to your afflictions, pitch a tent.
Yes,
come on, talk back to me. When you go through troubles, pitch a tent. Don't build a house. A house requires a plan. And then the plan requires a foundation. Then the foundation will lead the walls to stand up. And then there will come there will come an inspector to say the walls are fine. And thereafter you need a roof. Don't build a tent when you are going through trouble. Don't build a house, rather, when you are going through issues. Pitch a tent. You know why you pitch a tent? 2 Corinthians 4:17. For our light affliction. Can we all understand English?
Light
It did not say for our large affliction, but it says for our light affliction. Here it is, which are but for a moment. You see, the devil always wants to tell the people of God that there has been more years of your life in trouble than in God's success. And when that lie settles in you, you even forget to pray. You lose the power to stand in prayer because the devil lies to the church and says, how long will you withstand this trouble? How long will you endure this trouble? How long will you endure the afflictions in your life? For our light afflictions, which are but for a moment. Here it is, workage for us. A far more greater, oh my Lord, an excellent and eternal weight of glory. God requires of us to stand still. Moses and the children of Israel, when they had reached the shores of the Red Sea, they looked back. And as they turned their heads to look back, they saw the armies of Pharaoh. He did not just bring Brother Elvish. He did not just bring Brother Sifiso because we have put on some weight. But Pharaoh had brought his own choice armies. He has brought all his choice chariots. And he was pursuing against the armies of Israel. But when they looked back and they were faint in their hearts, they looked to Moses and they said, we die today. But God turned to Moses and he said, say to the children of Israel, stand still and see the salvation of God. That's all we have. You see, COVID, I must confess, some of us will succumb to it. But those of you who are left behind, stand still so that you will see the salvation of, you may lose your loved ones. Some of us have lost our jobs, but I am a witness that God is a restorer. And when you go through your troubles, pitch a tent, church. Don't always put your troubles on the scale. Because you know what happens? You start looking at the left. You say, but I work with him. We are in the same position. We receive the same salary. But I said in the beginning, the messages of God are only unique to you. We are not all blind Bartimaeus. He's not going to spit on the ground and mix the clay and put it on our eyes so the scales may be removed. To some, he just said, go and present yourself to the priest. 10 lepers came unto him and they said, have mercy on us, heal us of this leprosy. He said to them, go and present yourself to the priest. And as they went on their way, that's what the Bible says. And as they went on their way, behold, they were all healed. But here it is. One got to be whole because the 9 were just healed, but they still needed the priest. The one who came back was whole because he understood healing and wholeness. But when you go through your troubles, do not build, pitch a tent because it's but for a moment. Your light afflictions. Do not magnify your problems. Magnify your God. Do not enlarge your situation. Let the Lord be magnified in your lives. Job said, although he slayed me, because he was arguing with Bildad, and he was arguing with Eliphaz, and he was arguing with Shaw, and all they were telling him and reminding him of his position. But Job understood that even if he slayed me, again, he's the one I need to trust. Your troubles are not bigger than your God. Church of God and saints of Christ, do not weigh them. Rather, consider your God. Weigh not your troubles, consider God. That's what I say. When I consider the heaven, David says, you consider certain things and you forget the rest of them. Trouble don't last always, but our God, he stands forever true. Children of God and saints of Christ, please pray for me.